Hello and welcome to part 7 of the Akim 2020 virtual trek. Today we'll be coming down from Har Hayat and heading north up the Arava towards the Dead Sea. So let's go. Okay, so this is where we were, Har Hayat. We're going to come down 40 and head north up 90, about 100 kilometers, until we get to Khatseva. This is Moshav Khatseva, and we're going to stop at the Vidor Center and Yair Station. But before we do that, I want to just talk a bit about the lie of the land and discuss what this white area is around the Dead Sea. We've all seen it when we drive through there, those fields of white sandy canyons, both north and south of the Dead Sea. Well, let's look at the schematic of the area. This is the Kinneret, this is the Dead Sea. Khatseva, where we're standing now, is right here at the edge of this orange section. What is this orange section? Well, that's what's known as Lake Lisan. Lisan from the Arabic for tongue, like Lashon in Hebrew, because of the shape of this. And in fact, this was the lake that filled the Dead Sea Rift Valley 70,000 years ago and only disappeared about 12,000 years ago. Considerably longer and deeper than the Dead Sea today, some 250 meters deeper. In other words, the level was 250 meters above the level of the Dead Sea today. And if you go to the Dead Sea, you can see the bathing, if you want, around the mountains caused by Lake Lisan. When Lisan receded, it left behind sediment, and that sediment is that area of white that we saw in the picture. It's a soft stone known as mudstone, or marl in English, M-A-R-L. In Hebrew, it's known as havar. It's a very salty stone, not good for cultivation. Yet, in the Arava, which has only 6% of the country's land, has a population of less than 10,000 people, and has an annual rainfall of less than 70 millimeters, they manage to grow over 60% of the salad that goes in your bowls every year, as well as export fruit and veg all over the world. How do they do it? Well, that's what the Vidor Center comes to explain to we plebs. It's an outgrowth of the Yair Station. The Yair Station was a agricultural research station set up at Khatseva in the 90s and named after Yair Guron, who was the first director of the station. The Vidor Center was sponsored by J&F Australia and the Vidor family of Sydney, Australia. What can you do at the Vidor Center? It's a nice place to take the family for a break on the way down to the Dead Sea, to Eilat. What can you do there? Well, they have a movie, first of all, where they show you about agriculture and settlement in the Arava. Then they have an interactive museum, which is a lot of fun, where you can make it rain and understand the life cycle of plants and how they get water and how they get soil and all of that. Because the bottom line is the big problems for agriculture in the Arava is it's terribly hot, there is no water, and there is no soil. So you'd say, with all those three things, how on earth do they grow anything? Yet, and they do grow things. They grow beautiful peppers, followed by tomatoes and cucumbers, and dates, which is the biggest growth crop in the Arava, mostly down the south towards Eilat. You should know that dates require over 2 cubic meters of water per kilogram, yet they manage to grow them in the Arava. How do they do that? Well, let's talk about soil first of all. The soil, as we talked about at Everyone Farms, is terrible. It's very salty, it's clayish, you can't grow anything in it. The soil they grow in, they actually have to import most of it from Jordan. Unfortunately, it's starting to run out, and they need to replace it every 7 to 10 years. They will have to come up with new solutions, and the Yair Station is working on developing them. Water. Where does the water come from? They don't have rainfall. They're not on the national water carrier. So Mekorot has sunk in the area some 60 wells, some of them actually in Jordan, which are all controlled from Eilat. The wells are up to 1,600 meters deep, which is enormously deep for a water well. Now, as a rule of thumb, the deeper you go, the more brackish the water. Brackish means, salty, full of minerals, not really good for drinking, and not even good enough for agriculture. So when the water comes out from these deep wells, it often has to be treated, purified or filtered, and to be drunk, it has to go through RO, reverse osmosis, to make it drinkable, desalinated in other words. The irony is that the things that are a disadvantage are actually part of their competitive advantage. What do I mean? Well, first of all, the heat. Because it's so damn hot, they grow nothing in summer. They use that time for sanitation of the fields, and killing all the bugs, and repairing greenhouses and general maintenance. They grow in winter. And by growing in winter, they get premium prices for their crops. As for the water, the brackish water actually produces sweeter crops. The brackishness puts the plants under stress. They have to work harder to survive, and that makes them produce more sugars. It's a bit like the plant version of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's what's going on here. And that's why they produce prize-winning peppers, because of the brackish water. Now, the next problem they had was they were so successful, and the area station helped them so much in improving their crops that instead of producing 4 tons of tomatoes per dunam, which was how they began, they are now producing up to 18 tons of tomatoes per dunam. Of course, you flood a market with tomatoes, what happens? The price drops. So they were actually putting themselves out of business. Now they're looking for new varieties of fruit and plants that they can get premium prices, and flowers, because they grow flowers down there too, that they can get premium prices from in the markets, both locally and overseas. And that's why you see more and more funny coloured vegetables appearing on the market. You know, the black peppers and the turquoise zucchinis and the pink tomatoes, whatever. So it's worth a stop. Takes about an hour or so to do the whole spiel, and they've got a little coffee shop there as well if you want. From here, we're going to more or less cross the road, go about another kilometre further up towards the Dead Sea to Ir Ovot. Now, what's Ir Ovot, you ask me? Okay. Ir Ovot is principally archaeological ruins. The modern settlement of Ir Ovot was started in 1966 by a man named Simon Perlmutter and his 2 wives. He was a bit of a cultish sort of fellow. And they have, since that time, it's settled permanently by only four people live there now. And they accept volunteers, mostly Christian, missionary, Messianic, Jewish types. However, those people that were there look after the ruins and were involved in the excavation of the site. They've also got, there was a little British police hut there, which they've turned into I'd say it's a museum, but it's more like a shrine to early Zionist leaders, with posters and things inside, nothing particularly interesting. And the ruins themselves go back 3,000 years from possibly the period of the Edomites. We see Edomite ruins there, ruins from the time of King Solomon. We see ruins from the Judean kingdom. We see ruins from the Nabateans and from the Romans and from the Ottomans. Basically, this place in the middle of nowhere has been occupied for the last 3,000 years, more or less continually. And the question is why? Well, perhaps it helps if we actually look at the roads in the area. Let me pan out for a second. Okay, here we are. This is north-south and this is east-west. Ir Ovot actually sits at a crossroads of the road down the Dead Sea to Etzion Geber to Elat, and what was known as the incense or the spice route running from Yemen to Gaza, which would come across here, up here, and up the Scorpion's Ascent. Remember, we mentioned that before when we were discussing how the Golani Brigade went down to Elat in March 1949. This is the Scorpion's Ascent there. Road 227, no longer accessible, unfortunately. But it used to be a great ride. You can still hike around that area. The small crater, that's the Maktesh Katan over here. And this is the Scorpion's Ascent. Anyway, we're not sure what the name of the city was in ancient times. It could have been Hatzeva Fortress in, these are the ruins. It could have been Hatzeva Fortress in the Judean kingdom. And it may have been biblical Tamara, we don't know. But what we do know is in the Pointiga map, which we talked about earlier in Elat. Again, for those who weren't in the first session, it's a map discovered in the 14th century, probably written in the 14th century, that is a copy of a 3rd or 4th century Byzantine map of the Byzantine Roman Empire at the time. Okay, 4th century, can't be 3rd century Byzantine. You can see Philadelphia, this is, that's Amman, and somewhere along here is Tamara. Let me see, I had it before. Oh, come on, there it is, Tamara, right there. We think that may be Tamara, the site may be Tamara. And Tamara actually also occurs on the Madaba map, the famous Madaba map. That's Mamshit. And Tamara is there, Tamara. But funnily enough, it's not the ruins that are particularly interesting in this place. It's this, it's a tree. And this tree is a jujube tree. In Hebrew, Etz Domim, in English, jujube or Ziphus spina Christa, or Jesus or the Christ crown of thorns tree. Why did it get that name? Its branches have little tiny hooked thorns, so that if you take a branch, you can bend it around and make a crown of thorns and put it on your head. So the theory is that that's what was used for the crown of thorns of Jesus. Anyway, why is this tree so famous? Because it might possibly be the oldest tree in the country. Some measures it is only 300 years old, but other botanists have decided that it's possibly up to 2,000 years old. 2,000 years old, that means it was around here at the times of the Romans. Its trunk is 4.5 meters wide. Look at it, magnificent tree. And its canopy is over 15 meters wide. In spring, it still produces some fruit, domim, you know, the whatever, little red things, which is a bit of a local delicacy. And the weird thing is, it only should grow, it's not a native to this region, it should only grow where there is open water. And there is no spring here. However, we know, for instance, Lawrence of Arabia did a survey of this area in 1913, supposedly working for the Palestinian Exploration Fund, but in fact working for the British Army prior to World War I. And he was here and he noticed that there was a spring with flowing water at this site, and he talked about this tree. Sadly, the water dried up in 1963. It was En Hatzeva, in Hutzul. That was the name of the town, the Arab name of the town, En Hatzeva. Sadly, the water is no longer there. The tree is now artificially watered, and it's not looking very good, and I very much doubt it is going to see another millennium. So if you're passing by, stop in, say hello, give it a bit of a pick-me-up, and wish it well. And that's the end of today's trip. We'll see you for the last session.